Thank you very much. And I'm always looking forward to Wednesdays and Saturdays, to be honest. Just wanted to interact with all of you, learn from each one of you. So today we have some 4 interesting and leading examples, as Dr. Banerjee said. Last week, we discussed about the concepts of citywide inclusive sanitation to some extent. We looked at, sanitation as a public service. We sort of internalized that sanitation is a municipal function. Right now, it is kept out of the municipal ecosystem in most part of the world, particularly in South Asia. It is more looked at as a coping mechanism. There's no toilet, there's no containment, so people cope. If there is no water supply, dig a bore well or a tube well. So it's still a coping mechanism rather than a well-evolved public service. And since sanitation is a public health issue, it has to be looked at as a public service. That's one concept we looked at. It has to be part of the municipal function. Then we also looked at 4 F's. You may or may not recall. F number 1 is we need to have a framework in place. It could be in the form of a municipal act, or it should have a policy system very clearly outlining that sanitation, that is other than municipal solid waste management, is also public health issue, and it is a municipal function. It could be PHED or it could be an urban local body, but it is typically a local government function. First F is a framework. What is the second F? Anybody recalls? Sorry, sir?
Functional. Yeah, no. I mean, Prabhakar Saab, your speaker is a bit.
He's saying functional devolution.
Functional devolution, beautiful. It means it has to be devolved. The function has to be properly devolved to the local body, to a municipal commissioner, to an engineer, to a town planner. It doesn't matter. It should have a department. If it is left open, then sanitation belongs to everybody. Since it belongs to everybody, it belongs to nobody. That's a typical problem of a common property resource. If a common property belongs to everybody, everybody likes to enjoy that common property resource. But since it belongs to everybody, nobody protects it. Whether it is a water body or whatever is a common property, a forest. So sanitation is like that. It belongs to everybody, every department. So nobody owns it up, nobody is accountable. So functional devolution. What is the third F? Functionaries. Beautiful. We need to have dedicated functionaries in place. Otherwise, we only think big. We are all thinkers, but eventually somebody has to do. So for doing it, you need to have functionaries. Like the way solid waste management has functionaries down up to the local level. But sanitation ke liye koi hai nahi. The fourth F, we need to have finances, funds. Absolutely right. So these are necessary conditions and we need to move together towards that. That is the way we need to work towards. Now, it is not about sewer system, non-sewer system, based on the density, based on your economic status, based on the availability of water, capital investment program. We can find an appropriate system and solution to take the waste out, treat it in situ or away from it. In all this, we need to have a good plan, service delivery plan. As I said, sanitation cannot be addressed in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. It is a multi-generational in many cases. If you look at Mysore, Maharajas have built. If you look at Hyderabad, Nizams have built. Still we are building it. It's 50 years. So it takes time. So we need to have a plan which requires continual improvement. So these are some of the concepts. Now, these concepts, how they are getting implemented in Indian context, international context, is today's session. We have 4 fascinating examples. One from Kampala, another one is from Bengal, Bangladesh. Third one is from India, from Trichy. And the fourth one is South Asian context with multiple, ADBs working on multiple geographies. So we will have city experience of how they are thinking about addressing this problem of sanitation. What is their intervention? So I'm very, very excited that today we have 4 interesting case studies to translate this conceptual understanding into how they are putting into practice. Over to you, Dr. Banerjee. Let's begin the conversations.
Thank you so much, sir. Our first speaker for the day is Dr. Najib Lukhoa. He's a lead expert in urban sanitation and citywide inclusive sanitation. After a PhD from University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences from Vienna in environmental engineering and technology, he had been working in hydrology and water quality as a water quality specialist in Uganda. He has been working as a research scientist in bioframes in Austria, as a doctoral scientist there in Vienna, and then Uganda. He has been in East Africa. He has been the technical support for implementing different interventions activities in non-sewage sanitation and fecal sludge and septage management. At that point of time, he was the deputy director of the position. Today, he would be speaking as a lead expert in urban sanitation and citywide inclusive sanitation. He would be speaking about his experiences and interventions in Kampala. Over to you, Dr. Najib.
Thank you so much. Would you help me to share my screen or my presentation, or I can't?
We can share it, sir, if you want, or else you can try using the green color button down.
Sorry.
So do you want us to share?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be better, Josna. You can guide us and shift the slide.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Good morning from my side. I know it's afternoon, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. A very good introduction from my brother. Thank you for this invitation. Always very great to see everyone here. I will share. So thank you. So currently, I think the profile has been shared, but just for information, currently I'm the lead expert for CWIS. For the CWIS Technical Assistance Hub. This is an initiative of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I know we have one for Asia as well. And this one is for Sub-Saharan Africa. So I will try to make it short and simple. And I saw the videos at the beginning. They really highlighted much of the work that we're doing in Kampala. So I will summarize a few points here that will help us to rethink how we can make sustainable sanitation systems work. And I want to underline 3 words here: for everyone, in time and space. So for everyone, in time and space. Thank you. The next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, so we will have, I think the first bullet has been really covered, so I will not spend much time there. I will focus a lot on how we structured the CWIS program for Kampala, where I was the leader, the deputy director in charge of sanitation and environment. Someone mentioned responsibility. So in Kampala, we structured sanitation under the Directorate of Public Health, and I was leading this section. So I will share the kind of work that we did for about 8 years in Kampala, just for your information. Next, please. Yeah, so this has already been highlighted by Prof, a very good introduction. And I know I don't want to repeat it, but just for you to remember that under the acceleration framework for SDG 6, sanitation is highly structured as a human right. So everybody needs it, has a right to access it, and it's a public good. So I will not elaborate more on those because they have been highlighted already. But probably just to emphasize some few key considerations. So poor sanitation affects the most vulnerable, and this is something that we normally forget. Leaving sections of the city or groups of people out of the service delivery system is the biggest challenge, especially for the low-income countries like mine, Uganda and Sub-Saharan Africa, and I guess in Asia as well. And we all know that sanitation investment could be expensive, but COVID-19 has definitely demonstrated to us that failure to invest in adequate sanitation systems, water supply and sanitation systems, can be so costly and more than what we invest. Next. Yeah, again, this is just the UN SDG 6 Global Acceleration Framework, things that we've been talking about. So structuring services require fundamental elements. So governance, I know we've talked about this, financing, working with evidence, data, capacity development, innovations. And currently we are looking at a mix of innovative, not just technologies, by the way, governance, financing, you know, all these approaches in terms of service delivery are required. Next. Yeah, again, I will not emphasize this because I know you're already students of CWIS, so probably this framework is very familiar with you. Under the city service, the citywide inclusive sanitation, we try to focus on 3 key outcomes: equity, safety, and sustainability. And I will not elaborate on those because I know maybe they have been discussed already. But to achieve these, you need to structure well-organized functionalities. And I saw the participants raising this during the opening remarks. So clear responsibility and accountability mechanisms, and also making sure that the planning frameworks and management systems are well structured into the designated institutional department. Next. Okay, so we've learned that we are making some progress. I don't want you to look at all pictures in here, but probably on the left, you'll see that graph. Use of improved sanitation services by type. This is percentage 2017, a bit old, but you'll see on the right of the graph, the difference between the developing world and the least developed countries. The progress is slow. You also notice that the dark green are the sewer systems, and you will notice that the least developed countries are predominantly relying on non-sewer sanitation systems. So this will be critical in our conversation for Kampala. the mix of technologies and ensuring that there is equity in service delivery must consider all types of systems as long as they are safe and context specific and work for the population that you're targeting. Next. Yeah, but this progress is good, but I'm sorry to show this image, but I know you've seen this already, but we still have huge backlogs. We have huge backlogs. A colleague from Bangladesh in the video talked about solid waste. So everybody talks about solid waste management, but here you see a mix of sanitation blockages in fecal sludge mixed in drainage systems and solid waste management systems. So integrating all these systems is important, but most critically, definitely we have forgotten the fecal sludge management. Next, please. Okay, so in 2014, we in Kampala, I joined Kampala Capital City in 2012. And that time we wanted to start major reforms in critical services. And definitely the obvious one was solid waste management. And I and a few colleagues started thinking critically on the biggest burden that was causing quite a lot of problems, cholera outbreaks, and wash-related diseases. So with support from a few development partners, we were able to do some mapping of existing systems, service delivery, and the striking issue here, I know you've looked at waste flow diagrams and sheet flow diagrams, is we had the citywide, and you could see that the coverage was 57 safely managed. But when we segregated data for the informal settlements on the right, you could see the inequality. So, of course, the rich segments of the city were served by sewers and of course septic systems, whereas the poor relied on pits that couldn't even be emptied. And this was a very clear signal of the inequality in service delivery, which we needed to address. Next. So like we said in the framework, CWIS framework, that time we were not even discussing CWIS, but we are anyway following the CWIS framework principles. We decided to start looking at what could be the priority. So first of all, we had to definitely think about increasing infrastructure and services on a citywide scale. So this was a priority for us, a mix of both sewerage and on-site systems. The challenge was emptying, so we wanted to focus on those and also make sure we expand sewerage services. Most critically, private sector was identified as a key player. So informal settlements, number two, were the biggest backlogs. And so we also needed to look at that. We had very defragmented policy, legal, institutional structures at the city level. So we wanted to streamline those as well. There were issues of gender inclusion and equity. So we wanted to have these approaches in schools, in health facilities, in public facilities as well. And we realized that we could not just do this in isolation. We needed to also know what was happening elsewhere. So learning from other cities, the way this course is structured, for example, was a critical breakthrough for us. We partnered with different cities that were making progress. eThekwini municipality in South Africa we had a structured agreement to make sure that what we do has a benchmark to follow. Next. Yeah, so I will now highlight a few things. Of course, we did a lot of work, but a few things that were critical was governance. So you need very strong leadership from the beginning at a city level. So and the Kampala metropolitan area has a number of jurisdictions in terms of municipalities. So we needed all these mayors to work together to be champions of sanitation improvement and raise the bar of sanitation on the governance level in the councils. And that's how we structured an enabling memorandum. And these mayors were champions, and they were able to participate in some of our technical discussions. We could also share a number of innovations that could be tested. Next. So the next part, as I mentioned, we needed to also have a local specific regulatory instrument. And that's how we came up with the Sewage and Fecal Sludge Management Ordinance. So covering both sewer services and fecal sludge along the entire chain. So this was to guide in terms of regulation, in terms of development control, in terms of service delivery standards, and in terms of private sector participation, as well as treatment and disposal at a city level. And this was lacking, so we structured it, and it took a bit of time, but eventually we had it. Moreover, the mayors were already leading this work, and it was quite easy. Next. Yeah, so at a city level, you also have multiple players, a number of NGOs, small CBOs, and all these doing different things everywhere. So one of the strengths of our program was to bring everybody together. So we structured a framework for collaboration, development partners, private sector, utility, city, and private sector, everyone. So this was the Kampala Water and Sanitation Forum, and here the city could communicate the vision for sanitation improvement for the whole city, and different players could plug in with resources, technical expertise to make sure we focus on the clear priorities of the city instead of everybody doing whatever they wanted. Next. Yeah, so again, this is a value chain, and a number, I will not read all these, but just to show you that clearly at every level, we had a number of priorities to focus on, and this is where partners, government, development partners, NGOs would plug in wherever they could. But maybe I could highlight the minimum standards. These were important for households as well as the private sector to support household sanitation development and also the marketing approaches, so that not everyone builds what they want, but we are guided by clear minimum standards, because that was the biggest problem in the first case, especially in informal settlements. We could proceed to the next slide. Yeah, this is again an example of engaging communities, demand creation, the Mansons following the minimum standards, demonstrating, creating incentives for households in low-income areas to basically have these standards. It's one thing to develop a standard, but demonstrating it and showcasing it is important practically. What does it look like to implement the minimum standards? And that's what we deliberately did. Next. Here again, these are interventions in schools. NGOs were building toilets everywhere, but we realized our schools were really bad. So we prioritized. This is a showcase of prioritization at city level. So everyone who wanted to construct a toilet, we directed them to schools. And eventually we achieved a lot of improvements in schools and health centers particularly. Next. And this was a revolution of the public toilet. So it was, the lower one was the old type. So we started revolutionizing it to make them more usable, more attractive, and hygienic. And that was also part of the priority of our program. Next. Yeah, private sector development, as mentioned earlier. I will not talk about everything, but we structured a very systematic and deliberate program on making sure that we formalize private sector, we build capacity, we legalize them, and we structure service delivery models. Yes?
Dr. Naji, you have a few more people to go. I mean, if you could wind up.
Yes. You could go to the last slide, actually, I think. Yeah,
you
these
keep
are
some time for
systems.
discussions also.
Yeah, these are sewer systems. So we were not only focusing on site, but also decentralized and centralized sewer systems. I think the last slide. You could go to the last one. Yeah, so anyway, the issue is, I want to just mention 2-3 points here. You can also read them. But we learned that strong political will and governance was critical. Being adaptive and in terms of learning, so don't be static. So we were learning, failing, and learning. You can imagine a city of a poor, a low income country, limited resources. So you need to work with things that are tested, test them, try to fail, and make sure that you scale them up when you realize their function. So capacity development and adaptive learning were critical for us. And actually, the current system of the city is working on this foundation that we built over the years. I'm happy to engage in further discussion, and also my email could be provided. Thank you so much. These are a few highlights I could share. Sorry if I have overshot in terms of time, but thank you so much again.
No, sir, you are bang on time. That's sort of thing. Professor Chari, I would like you to conclude, I mean, add on a few, anything you want to, and then conclude.
Thank you so much, Dr. Najib. It's always a pleasure, brother, to talk to you. There's quite a few questions in the chat box. You can attend to a couple of them. Just one from the conversation. Someone asked, my colleague asked me, you have this very interesting Water and Sanitation Forum and CWIS Advisory Steering Committee to track the policy. So what is the monitoring mechanism you have to make sure some of these policies are actually operationalized and implemented? Do you have any system in place?
So the most fundamental issue here, my brother, is to make sure that there is a lead. Who is the lead? And responsibility. This is the most important. Who is the most, where is the accountability center? So everybody plugs into the city, and it is the responsibility of the city to make sure that the priorities agreed upon in the forum are followed up by the different commitments that are made. So the responsibility, accountability center is important. Otherwise, no one would care. You will have all these forums and no one will care, because eventually everybody contributes to the city development plan. And whoever adds a block to it is a plus for the city. So building capacity and strengthening the city or utility, whoever is responsible to lead is very critical. And that's where the accountability lies.
So the point here is that a well-defined accountability is important to drive the change, and then it becomes easy to monitor the performance, without which if the accountability is diffused, then it is very difficult to pinpoint responsibility and monitor performance. That's what friend is speaking about. One more question, this accountability is defined, but who is going to finance this, particularly the non-sewer component of the sanitation, which is actually predominantly owned up by the urban poor? Is there any cost recovery mechanism? Who is going to finance? Is it coming from the taxes, or is it cross-subsidized from water supply or from other holding tax? How does it work? How is this whole so-called sanitation for the poor is financed?
Thank you. I mean, this is going to be a critical question for many years, my brother. And I know we are trying out all kinds of things, tariff, surcharges, subsidies, and all this. But what we did for Kampala, for example, was to, first of all, understand what are the fundamental barriers to improvement of sanitation in these low-income areas. And some of the things we realized, one was there are a few people actually who own land in these informal settlements. And in Kampala, the context of Kampala, these are the landlords. We call them the landlords. So they build a number of units of small houses, and then they rent them out to low-income people. So the target primarily was the landlords, first of all. And the resources here is not going into actual construction of the toilet, but to structure a program that engages landlords to make sure that they actually do have provisions for sanitation. And this gave us a big milestone. So with investment in engagement of landlords, trying to put enforcement mechanisms in place, and a few incentives for those that comply was critical, for example. And that pushed quite a lot of communities out of the open defecation. Of course, the next step then was to look at how can we support those that really can't. And at the moment in time, we structured a budget within the city from the city budget. By the way, in 2012, we had zero budget for sanitation. By the time I left in 2020, we had at least $1 million per year for the entire city. Again, this is not too big. This city is quite complicated, but you can imagine that milestone. So engaging the political leaders to put a budget at least, and that budget focuses on fundamental priorities. One, public sanitation. Two, the most vulnerable communities that are, for example, hit by outbreaks. And three, supporting where the most vulnerables are, especially the disabled, the children, the public schools, the health centers, and so that is a budget. So in summary, two approaches for us. So one is looking at catalytic financing of the poor. So this is not direct subsidization or handouts to the people, but looking at those investments that can catalyze change. Two, having dedicated budget from the city, either through revenues, I don't know, whatever it comes from, depending on your context, and that budget is able to serve the most priority needs of the poor. So these are the two approaches, at least for Kampala.
30-second one. Is this budget also used for subsidizing the poor for desludging operation, not only the provision of the toilets, but also for the desludging operation? Is that the budget can be used?
Yes, yes, yes. Especially scheduled dislodging events in the most poor areas. So we had a program scheduled not just for solid waste, I mean for pit emptying, but it also included, it was a full package. So we could schedule such service delivery models into informal settlements. The package included solid waste collection at subsidized fees, emptying services at subsidized fees. So this was dedicated to that, using that budget. But we could also have emergency response, especially during COVID. We used the same budget for emergency response. People were not able to empty toilets, and it was raining. The city was flooding most of the time. So we used this budget again to create an emergency fund for communities.
Thank you, brother. So I will take question of Mr. Gupta a little later. Be patient, Mr. Gupta. The message is that I think the city is owning up sanitation, number one. There's a very clear ownership, political administrative ownership. Second is that there's a very clear accountability. There's a clear monitoring. And also very important is that there's a budget line, particularly for the marginalized. I think that these are very powerful lessons for all of us who are on this call, who are from city leadership side. Please recognize this. These are the key powerful lessons coming from Kampala. Thank you so much. Banerjee Saab, over to you for the next speaker.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Najib. Please stay with us, take on our questions at the chat box, and then
I'm going to answer them.
Can you answer some of the questions in the chat box, please?
Chat box, please.
Yes,
thank you.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Our next speaker for the day is Ms. Grazine Salazar. She's a project coordinator for sanitation under ADB's under ADB's water sector group, specifically working towards accelerating sanitation for all Asia and in the Pacific. With a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering and a master's degree in environmental engineering, she's a licensed chemical engineer with years of experience of working in various local water utilities in the Philippines, with focus on water and wastewater project developments, implementations, and wastewater plant operations. She also works closely with local water districts in developing and implementing septage management programs. She is an expert who provides a consultation in management and in support in promoting citywide inclusive sanitation principles with ADB operations and among target developing member countries. Over to you, Ms. Grazine.
Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon to all. I'm Graciel, and I will be sharing with you some of Asian Development Bank's experiences in making CWIS work within our institution and in our projects. Next slide, please. Asia's cities are growing rapidly. By 2030, more than 55% of the region's population will live in urban areas, thus posing a challenge in managing vast amounts of human waste. More than 2 billion people in Asia and the Pacific still lack access to safely manage sanitation services, and countries are off track to achieve SDG 6 by 2030. City development can take many forms. As you can see in these photos, we have slums on a reverse floodplain next to a higher income housing. Development could also take a picture, next slide please, to high-rise urban development and coastal settlements. These pictures show the diversity of socioeconomic groups and the rapid encroachment of urbanization on adjacent rural areas. The type of housing also varies, as seen in the next slide, depending on geography, access to land, history, climate, income levels, and culture. This wide range of physical and socioeconomic conditions in different parts of the city means that there is no one size that fits all situations. A full range of technical and institutional options need to be available to provide urban services for all. Given these challenges, ADB prioritizes water investments and interventions. Next slide, please. And are integrated across 4 focal areas to deliver successful and sustainable outcomes. Water as a sustainable resource, universal water and sanitation services, productive use of water in agriculture and the economy, and reduced water-related risks. To date, ADB's water sector group active portfolio is at $19.2 billion, with around 51% committed to water supply, sanitation, and wastewater projects, as shown in the chart on the left. Meanwhile, the chart on the right illustrates also the water sector group's portfolio, but this time investments are disaggregated according to the 5 operation departments of ADB. For sanitation in particular, next slide please. ADB has already invested $5.8 billion since 2011 to date, which is 22% of the total water portfolio. The ADB sanitation investments so far have benefited around 52 million people across Asia and the Pacific. Next slide, please. ADB also has a sanitation financing partnership trust fund, which is supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. To date, this grant had triggered a total of around $400 million worth of investments in non-sewer or on-site sanitation alone, benefiting around 13.6 million people so far. This fund particularly supports the identification, testing, and pilot implementation of innovative sanitation solutions, such as new policies, business models, and technologies to increase support for non-sewer sanitation and septage management in ADB's developing member countries. As we can see here, some activities implemented under this fund include pilot of new technologies like improved toilets and septic tanks, solar septic tanks, and new toilet technology in both houses. We also build operators' capacity through the conduct of water operator partnerships or WOPs programs with focus on fecal sludge management. Under this fund, there was also development of different policies and standards and improvement of institutional awareness through knowledge sharing events and publication of knowledge products. Next slide, please. ADB, its clients, and our key development partners have invested resources in urban sanitation programs. But first, most investment has been for centralized sanitation, which poses a challenge to providing services to high-density areas and informal settlements, since aside from it being technologically challenging, it is also quite expensive. Second, institutional capacity assessment and investment is poor, and poverty targeting is weak. There has been limited involvement also of small-scale private sector, which is usually the main sanitation service providers in low-income and non-sewer areas. And the track record for long-term operation and maintenance of sewers and wastewater treatment plants are very poor. So what needs to change? With this, the government and their development partners need to radically rethink their approach and investment priorities for sanitation. There should be focus on adequate and reliable sanitation infrastructure and more sanitation services for all. Next slide, please. Institutions may also need to be restructured to accommodate a CWIS-driven strategy. And lastly, but not the least definitely, systems and incentives need to be in place to monitor sanitation service performance and allow evidence-based strategic and tactical challenges to optimize performance in service delivery. In the next slide, we can see the ADB Citywide Inclusive Sanitation House. As we can see here in the framework, CWIS comprises 4 elements: capable institutions, safety and reliability, equity and inclusion, and sustainability. These come with associated actions to achieve the desired outcome, which is eventually for everyone in the urban area to have access to and benefit from adequate and sustainable sanitation services. We must remember that CWIS is not based on assumptions about what is needed. It is not just focused on building infrastructure. It does not mean that it is only for fecal sludge management or on-site sanitation only or sewerage, or it is not only meant for sanitation project for slums. But rather, we must remember that CWIS is based on evidence of how, why, and where sanitation services are failing or succeeding. CWIS also addresses the entire sanitation service chain and includes all citizens. CWIS coordinates sanitation sector with solid waste management, drainage, water supply, land use management, and housing. And CWIS builds institutional capacity, accountability, and financing mechanisms for sustaining services. Next slide, please. How does the CWIS framework play into mainstreaming CWIS concept in the ADB project cycle? We have the citywide inclusion sanitation guidance notes, which aim to aid in effectively embedding CWIS principles and planning and delivering sanitation services to ADB developing member countries. We can see in this diagram the ADB project cycle. And illustrated here are the guidance notes that we have, which is relevant to each project stage. We have various guidance notes in use, ranging from the rationale of having CWIS in projects to inclusion checklists and technology options, as well as sample monitoring frameworks. These tools aid in project planning and implementation of our project officers and ensuring that CWIS elements are included. So far, next slide, please. So far, we have 3 guidance notes available in the public, and I could provide the links to this guidance notes in the chat box later. And we hope to share more with the public in the future. These guidance notes may be applicable to each of your areas and would be a good help in planning for your CWIS journey. Next slide, please. ADB has a number of projects which has embedded CWIS principles in the planning, design, and implementation. One example is the proposed Baguio Resilient City Tourism Project in the Philippines. Baguio City is the Philippines' summer capital, with tourist arrivals recording a twofold rise in the past decade. Rapid tourism growth can stress urban infrastructure if not managed carefully. CWIS approach was considered in this project, not just aiming to improve sanitation services in the city through mere infrastructure, but also through capacity development program and tariff reforms. Sanitation investments under this project include the construction of a co-treatment wastewater treatment plant, which would treat both sewage and septage, rehabilitation of the existing sewer network, and connecting additional 5,700 new sewer connections. During project preparation, ADB also provided technical assistance to the Baguio City local government unit to help them develop an evidence and data-based fecal sludge management plan. The TA also helped them set up the fecal sludge management governance system, and also through the TA, studies were conducted on scheduled dislodging, sanitation social program, and tariff. To the TA, capacity development initiatives were also held, such as trainings and workshops to support the LGU in compliance, asset management, information system, and O&M. To date, water operation partnership is being developed to complement the city's implementation of its FSM plan and to ensure that the sanitation and wastewater programs for the city would benefit all citizens. Next, we also have another project which is the Coolness Sewage System Development Project. This will develop a new sewage system in Coolness, covering commercial and densely populated areas with about 850,000 population by 2027. The project will specifically support both centralized sewage system and FSTP. This would support the establishment of 2 STP, sewage treatment plants, with a capacity of 80 MLD per day, MLD, and 1 FSTP, fecal sludge treatment plant, of 160 cubic meter per day. The project would also support construction of sewer network and around 27,000 property level sewer connections. The project would also support the capacity development of the Coolness Water Supply and Sewerage Authority, and lastly, awareness raising on sanitation and hygiene. Another project which has considered CWIS in its development is located in India, which is the Uttarakhan Integrated and Resilient Urban Development Project. This project supports the government in enhancing access to high quality and resilient water supply and sanitation services. And the project will apply a range of integrated, resilient, and innovative solutions. For the sanitation component, this project has considered both centralized and decentralized sanitation systems to ensure that all will have access to adequate and equitable sanitation services. Centralized STPs will be constructed, new sewer lines will be laid, old sewer lines will be replaced. Households will also be connected to new and improved sewer lines. For households not within the sewer catchments, a fecal sludge management program will be applied. Also, there will be a pilot testing of 20 mobile toilets with gender-sensitive and inclusive design features, with the aim of preventing open urination and defecation, thus stimulating behavioral change towards healthy sanitation practices. To further embed CWIS in this project, an analysis of the existing sanitation sector at the state and city level was conducted through technical assistance. Findings in these assessments would ensure the adoption of CWIS approach to project design, and that appropriate technologies and solutions would be considered in sanitation planning. The service delivery assessment has an evidence and database approach, making use of available reports and primary data obtained through actual surveys, focus group discussions, and key informant interviews. It also makes use of tools such as the fecal flow diagram, or SFD, as shown in this slide, to better map out and illustrate current sanitation conditions in the area. Moving forward, ADB aimed to further support investments and initiatives in CWIS. To do this, our team ensures that we closely cooperate with our operations department to mainstream and promote CWIS projects, making sure that these are in line with the operational priorities of addressing remaining poverty and reducing inequalities, accelerating progress in gender equality, making cities more livable, promoting rural development, and strengthening governance and institutional capacity. Some sanitation initiatives currently in ADB's project pipeline include more data and evidence-based sanitation planning, similar to what we are currently doing in Baguio in India. There's also promotion of strengthened data collection and monitoring system, incorporation of IMIS and digitalization initiatives in CWIS projects. We are also venturing into wastewater-based epidemiology monitoring, specifically for COVID-19 detection in wastewater. ADB is still committed in providing CWIS expert support, awareness raising, and capacity building through knowledge products, peer-to-peer learnings, and water operator partnerships. To sum it up, this is my last slide. We from ADB advocate not just merely conventional sanitation, which usually focus on centralized systems and infrastructure only, but CWIS in addressing sanitation challenges in Asia and the Pacific. We aim to increase access to adequate and inclusive sanitation systems where human waste is safely managed along the whole sanitation service chain. To do this, we ensure that we take into consideration the ADB CWIS house in our project planning cycle. We also take into account the enabling environment, meaning the institutions, policies, and regulations needed to help stakeholders make informed decisions. We also recognize the need for not just the public sector, but also for the private sector in providing water supply and sanitation services. There is no perfect solution for the sanitation challenges in the region. Thus, ADB is keen to continually introduce new approaches and alternative sanitation innovations to achieve access to equitable sanitation solutions, making sure that everyone, regardless of gender, status, and settlements, we make sure that everyone benefits from adequate, equitable, and safe sanitation service delivery outcome. This is the end of my presentation, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Ms. Krasil. Sir, if you could take over to conclude the session.
Yeah, I think a very fascinating presentation, Ms. Krasil. So thank you so much. So rich, and this is actually CWIS in practice. This is really CWIS in practice. A couple of just one or two points I think she made very powerful. If unless and until everybody is safe, nobody is safe. And I would like that last slide, Josna, if you could put it back. It's a very, very powerful statement. It is not about improving the lives of a select people through sewerage system, which used to be a thinking of the past. I'm also an engineer. That's how we are trained to design. Josna, if you could put the last slide of Ms. Krasil, that will be the last but one. Yeah. If you see here, no one is safe until everybody is safe or everyone is safe. So it means we need a combination of solutions, and that's she tried to amplify that it is the public health that is important. It's not the technology or the pathway. We can have multiple pathways to reach the outcome of safe sanitation. Thank you so much. Josna, you can take it out. Now, ma'am, I just wanted to understand, for ADB point of view, there are many, many questions. Josna, you can take it out. From AD point of view, it's a big shift in the thinking, because my understanding of ADB and also all the big development partners like ADB, World Bank, they are into big projects. Governments actually collaborate with them for big projects like sewer systems and water supply systems, STPs, and so on and so forth. Now, non-sewer sanitation and the type of interventions that you are speaking, they're actually tiny in compared to the large portfolio of investments. So how this shift is actually working on the ground when you are engaging with the state governments, it could be in India, outside India, Uttarakhan, or anywhere. Is there a greater resonance now from the states and the cities compared to that in the past? How do you navigate this?
Thank you for the question. Yes, the buy-in in the concept is a little difficult in convincing our clients to take up the CWIS approach, of course, and the project officers themselves. So what we do is to highlight that it is not a choice that you have to implement either centralized or either non-sewer sanitation interventions, but rather look at it as a whole, that it could be a combination of all. Because if you look at it only as fragments of the project, but not as a holistic sanitation component of the project, then it would look like it's just a small investment. I don't think that we're going to get anything out of it. But if we look at it holistically, we can see that each of the project complement each other, not just the hard component, the infrastructure, but also the soft components, which is the capacity building, and also making sure that the government, the ministries, they are accountable. The agencies, related agencies in the planning and implementation, they are all accountable in making the policies, in ensuring that the sanitation programs are really would be successful and really successful in the implementation and operations.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think people like you are actually championing, and then I think things will become pretty easy for others to partner and take it forward. One more last question. So been repeated. You mentioned about IMIS. I think it is Integrated Municipal Information System. Friends, as we know, cities and states, they monitor municipal solid waste, door-to-door collection, segregation, and so on and so forth. Some of the service level benchmarks, even for water, it's nowadays it's monitored by the practitioners at the city as well as at the state level. But when it comes to sanitation, it is often not monitored, or it's monitored outside the municipal management system. Now, ma'am, you mentioned about IMIS, Integrated Municipal Information System. I think that's what you are trying to say. Are there any good examples of sanitation getting embedded in the municipal information management system? If you so, can you share some results, or can you share some literature for the benefit of our participants?
Actually, currently ADB has an ongoing assignment and ongoing study in Nepal on how to have an effective data planning and collection system. This is currently being done by CEP University. So eventually, once the study is finished, I think we could also share the results, because we're also planning to pilot something out of it. Since you know that developing a holistic and integrated planning and design, it's really important that we have a credible, reliable, and standardized data and information. So for this, we could also share some, once we have the study results, I think we could share it also to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we will, there are quite a few questions, ma'am, in the chat box. If you could kindly stay back a little more and then attend to some of those questions, we'll be very grateful to you. Thank you very much. Dr. Banerjee, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Grizel. Thank you, sir. Our next speaker for the day is Mr. Niladri Chakraborty. He is a team lead at Indian Institute of Human Settlements, working in Tamil Nadu state of India, with a dual Masters in Population Sciences as well as Ecology and Environment. He is a development professional with 17 years of hands-on experience in water, sanitation, hygiene, as well as public health. Mr. Niladri Chakraborty, over to you for your talk.
Thank you, Dr. Banerjee, for such elaborate introduction. And good afternoon, all. Dr. Banerjee, could you please put up the slide, or shall I share?
Jyotsna would be helpful.
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Okay. Jyotsna, please make it a full screen. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so so in my presentation, basically, I'll be sharing our experience of implementing CWIS on a city called Tiruchirappalli in Tamil Nadu, which is one of the CWIS city in India out of 4, and which is supported by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Next slide, please. To start with, I want to give you a context and introduce you with the city, CWIS. Next slide. So, Tiruchirappalli is basically a million-plus city, and it's the 4th largest municipal corporation of Tamil Nadu. Roughly, it is having almost 65 wards. And in subsequent slides, I will give you an overview of the sanitation scenario of this city. The interesting part of this city is this is the only city out of 4 CWIS cities we are having in India, which is having both on-site and off-site sanitation in together. Next slide, please. So yeah, this slide will give you an overview of the city, the sanitation scenario. If you go by the chain, so you can see the sanitation coverage is more or less around 80%. This city is also having almost 400 community and public toilet, quite a huge number. Slum numbers are also not less, 294 plus slums. As I told you, 33% households when depending on the underground CWIS connection. But if you look at the map, all the peripheral orange zones, these are all totally depending on the on-site thing. The green parts are fully covered, next are partly covered, and that delineation of the sewer line is going on in phase 3 and phase 4. But irrespective of that, there will be a significant section which will be still on depending on the on-site system. And that city is for the on-site part around 70 to 80 sludging trucks are there. Total 54 operators in this city who actually cater that. In the treatment side, around 88 MLD STP, basically it's a waste stabilization pond is there, of which currently 58 MLD is operational. The city is practicing co-treatments is more than a decade, I would say, and 52 pumping station and decades. So this is giving an overview of the Trichy city. We started implementing this CWIS since 2018 October. Before that, IHS was implementing, we have another state level program called Tamil Nadu Urban Sanitation Support Program. At that phase, focus was mostly into the FSM. So 2016 to 2018 phase, mostly the diagnostic, the institutional arrangement, all this thing was done. But with CWIS, the shift gone beyond FSM, as Ms. Grezil was also mentioning. It's not just only FSM now; it's become inclusive sanitation, safe sanitation. That so of course the spectrum got widened. And next slide, please. Before jumping into what we are doing and what is our lesson learned, basically I'm interested to share that thinking how the CWIS looks like on ground and what are the lesson. I just put out. I know you're all familiar with these key principles because. While designing the intervention, these are the backbone. We have to keep in mind all these 7 principles so that whatever output or outcome we are indicating that should comply with these principles. So that's why I just put out here. Needless to go line by line. You all are familiar with this. And in subsequent slide, next slide, please. This is again the very popular 2x3 matrix we kept on telling, which actually help us to understand how the service outcome will look like. And for that, for the sustenance, for the scaling up, how the system functions is required. So next slide and next slide. So hence, from here, I would love to describe a little bit times I'll take to share when we are talking about safety, what intervention we did in the city. And so safety, which is again that principle wise safe sanitation, and in this regard our entire intervention have been along the value chain. So let me start with the access side. So, and especially keeping under mind the urban poor, a major portion of the urban poor household sanitation was taken care by the city, where our support was data and all thing. And as I told you, there are quite a huge number of community and public toilets, and a huge chunk of population of urban poor relying on that, since the infrastructure were aging and there was an issue of operation maintenance. So during this intervention, around 120 plus community and public toilet, the infrastructure was renovated. The gender components, because that anyway I'll be going to discuss later, that was introduced. And not only the infrastructure side, and this entire investment came mostly from the ULB as well as some CRS funding. And not only the infrastructure side, parallelly the operation management side was also strengthened. I mean, this city has a legacy of managing community toilets by the SHG groups, but that needed some strengthening, more transparency, more record keeping, etc., training them so that that can be nicely operated. That was done, and it is good. Having said that, I would also say still there is an unmet need of the individual household toilet, and which the team on ground and the local will be trying to figuring out because of multiple reasons, finance an issue, then somewhere they declared themselves open defecation free, to allocating finance become an issue for the ULB. These issues are cropping up, but yeah, I mean that problem is still on the ground. So if we move to the containment side, our work has been mostly on the demonstration. So questions, I will be responding at the later stage. I'm seeing the questions are coming. Yes. So containment side, it is mostly demonstration. Again, the demonstration is categorized in two ways. One is the household level, and one is the community level, community toilet level, or the bulk generator, which we kept on telling in this bulk liquid generator. Because I'm sure you all would be admitting, we kept on talking about the chain, and in this chain, containment is the most trickiest part. So if we don't fix that thing, I mean, this entire safe sanitation can be attained. But on the flip side, dealing with the legacy structure, etc., especially at the household level, is a very tricky thing. So yes, around 8 to 9 demonstration we did on the ground on the household level. Similarly, we did couple of demonstration at the community public level. In the photograph, there is one toilet in RMS colony where the containment was such design, which is having around footfall of 80 to 90. Almost every alternative day, it required dislodging. With this improvement, now it is almost 2 years, it is safely running, and they have not dislodged, I mean, not required to dislodge, it was designed like that. So that is also saving a lots of money from the ULB, because they had to send the cesspool truck and empty. So now the bottom line is that in this demonstration, we found very quick appetite from the bulk generator side from the ULB. So they are now find out around 30 toilets across the city which having all this problem where septage is leaking, etc. And they are in a process of scaling this up, which is one of the also another agenda key city-wide the demonstration should be scaled up, which is successful on ground. For the new structure, the work is going on with the building, because Tamil Nadu has a very strong and robust building rule and approval system. At least approval system, there is some changes is required, which is currently not happening on ground. For that, we did a study, and there we are working with the respective departments so that that changes can be bring in the system. But it's again, it's a learning from the Trichy. But if we can implement, definitely all the ULB will be benefited from these changes. Next slide, please. The third part is the collection and conveyance. As I told you, yes, 33% household is relying on the on-site, but the off-site, but the on-site household depending on the on-site is also quite a big, and there's a thriving private sector market of the DSO, but the ULB and the government of Tamil Nadu decided to do a very soft touch regulation of all those things. So their registration, licensing fee to encourage them so that they more bring the loads into the designated site. They kept the licensing fee, etc., very nominal, and annually they are deciding. Plus, in CWIS Trichy, we have demonstrated some IT-enabled tool for the monitoring, like one picture you can share, which is basically take records digitally of all the loads coming to various decanting stations across the cities. Similarly, there is another app has been introduced, which actually helps in periodic dislodging of the bulk generators, where you will be actually deploy their trucks. So that app is algorithm such that so that it creates the schedule and it goes to the dislodging operator. So it's all embedded within the government system. And the fast app is also now in a process of handing over. So demonstration done, we are just handing over TCC to run them. Emptying service of the urban pool is one area. Maybe later stage also I'll be explaining some more. And Professor Cherry also was asking the questions on that when he was discussing, because our learning from working on the urban poor is that because of multiple reasons, maybe in later stage I'll discuss, they are actually paying more while emptying their containment. So with private sector, we tried to do something, I mean, so that they also get their adequate business and these people also get the service. But to be honest, that thing doesn't work out. So finally, we are moving to the ULB, and how this can be done. Now these things are in progress, because ULB also having a fleet of only 2 trucks. So they also need to increase the trucks, whereas the ULB charges is much lesser than the private sector in Trichy. As far as treatment site is concerned, as I told you, there is a WSP, the not major work we have to do. We have to help the ULB so that all performance indicators are maintained, PCB testing every month is gone, maintenance protocol are in place because it's a WSP, mostly biological. So water hazard removal, cleaning, grit removal, all this should be done on place. Plus, this city is having, as I told you, is practicing the co-treatment for more than a decade. So all the co-treatment sites or decanting stations are properly maintained and all protocols they are following. Next slide, please. Now from safety to, if we move to the equity. So equity here mostly one major piece of work of ours with the sanitation worker, which is an integral part of this entire sanitation business. So more than 3,500 plus of different category of sanitation worker we are engaged with in this city. There are some formal, semi-formal, contractual, different types of there. So 3 to 4 we are engaged with them. One, we try to link all of them who are eligible to available all the social security schemes, because Tamil Nadu government having multiple department having lots of social security scheme. Some are exclusively for the sanitation workers, and some are for the poor people, SC, ST. So that was one our major piece of work. Second part was that helping them to get alternative or supplementary livelihood, whether the sanitation worker themselves or their family members. So this work we actually extended beyond the ULB, and we collaborated with the Labor Department, with the National Livelihood Mission Urban, NSDC, and private sectors. Health-seeking behavior, you all know sanitation workers. So health intervention, sanitation worker who are in a regular payroll, they are more or less getting a regular health checkup, etc., from the ULB side. But we discovered that the sanitation worker who are from the informal sectors are not getting into that purview. So they are how collaborating with the local private hospital to their CSR wing, the health checking and etc. has been initiated in situ. I mean, it's happening all in their slums. Plus occupational health safety beat also we started working a little bit. We started with the dislodging operators, and we are expanding into the other sanitation worker bit. As far as gender is concerned, gender mainstreaming, some of the outcomes are very cross-cutting, because when we are talking about sanitation worker, a major chunk of them are women. So how they are getting access to all the safety net livelihood, that's one. The city is having 5 very powerful women DSOs. So we are supporting them through the business coaching, etc., so that they can expand their business horizon. Access side, I already mentioned all the gender component, from access to the absorbent menstrual hygiene management, etc., component has been added. That is again major chunk done by the ULB with support from us. Apart from that, livelihood support, enterprise development, lots of things has been done with the women from the urban poor settlement and sanitation worker. Plus, from the demand from the ULB, we are also supporting to strengthen the POSH committee, which take care of the sexual harassment at the workplace. The committee, the training them, strengthening them, and so that they can exercise their power. So that also we have initiated in last couple of months. Next slide, please. In sustainability part, because definitely all the interventions and all the demonstration, unless we consider this part, definitely it's not going to sustain. So first and foremost is that the institutionalized part, because this CWIS concept, it's a new thing, how it works, how it looks like, and who will be responsible for this thing. I mean, this challenge we faced during the FSM bit also, and now also. So clearly defining roles and responsibilities. So that piece of exercise we did sitting with the ULB, currently which department is doing what and who will be the responsible. But yes, it is not the end game, because it needs further endorsement, lots of other processes are there. But yes, that part finished and it is gone for the endorsement part. And some, I would also want to make a point here that all the things happening here, I mean, idea, if we think that CWIS city is doing all the thing and that can be taken in state, it's not happening in real cases. Many things we managed to do because we have a state program and many directive came from the state. That is why the way we envisage CWIS that happened in the city. So I wanted to make this point here. Apart from the demand side, I mean, with the ULB side, we are also started working with the citizen forum, which is there in the city, so that they can start so that the grievance addressal system can be strengthened, as well as the citizen can start demanding for the services, proper services. And of course, integrating capacity building, BCC initiative, etc. are very important, for which is going in parallel with all the intervention for looking forward to sustainability. We kept on talking about ULB and other departments, but our while working, we realized that the non-state actors also played a very pivotal role here. For especially if we are talking about sustenance, local partners. When we are talking partner, it may be NGO, academic institution, because they will be there beyond this project phase, and many things they can still continue. Local journalists are playing a very key role in our cases, because when this CWIS, different CWIS things are coming up, local Hindu, Times of India, they are bringing very good story on that. And workers front federation, they're federating them, developing their federation association is also one way we are trying, so that things continue beyond this implementation phase. Next slide, please. These are the phase. I have not put any photo because these are all process side and we are at a various stages. But what we realize for all this outcome, if we look at the system function, responsibility, resource management, these are the things we need. One is non-overlapping and clear mandates for the inclusive sanitation and FSM, both that has to be there if you want to the CWIS scale up across the state. Role and responsibility defining and institutionalization is very, very important. I can just take 1 more minute to cite an example, because many big building in the Trichy we found they, as per the norm, they have not constructed an STP and they are just managing with constructing a bulk generator. That was pointed out by the health department. But when we started to getting into work, at one point of time, they got confused it will be whose role, whether it is the health department will take care of that or the engineering vertical of the same ULB. So that's why this is very important to know what is whose role is what, because as of now, FSM, CWIS, all these things are not very much integrated in their job responsibility, which is defined and which is conferred powered by the Municipal Act. So that's one. Various
Mr. Niladri, Mr.
Yes.
Niladri, could you wind up a bit fast?
Yeah, I mean 1 or 2 slides up there.
Yeah, please.
So other things are licensing, MO, etc. is also definitely required. Responsibility, as I mentioned. Next slide, please. Accountability, already it has been discussed. Professor Cherry was also mentioning. So other than ULB strengthening, keeping them center phase, IT enabled background, community engagement, this is also a major point. And since Trichy recently having this elected member, etc., so that this thing is reflecting here, but engaging with them is making lots of change in that. Resource management side, I want to mention Tamil Nadu government has a state resource plan, but that is targeting mostly on the treatment side, where we are now endorsing, we are now working with them so that some resource planning along the value chain, not just the treatment. Separate budget light and item for FSM. Other cities has managed to great job, but here we are still struggling at one level. And plan and budget linkages also we are finding quite lack. So they are also the one piece of work we are doing with them. Next slide. So these are the, I think many people who will be willing to intervene in the ground on the CWIS will be very useful. I'm not going to repeat the R&R and ULB approach because already we mentioned. Just 2 points here I want to highlight. One is that when we started CWIS also in the implementing, again, we had to listen lots of requests from demonstration. So if that area we have to be very tactical, because government most of the time keep on requesting demonstration or infrastructure. where CWIS talks very different thing. But whatever CWIS implementation, lots of process through we went. So that was a very big learning for us. And again, I want to highlight the non-state actors' role is very crucial in that. These are some general learning. Next slide. Specific learning may not be relevant for all the cities. I just, anyway, the presentation will be shared, you can see. But one thing I want to highlight, again, for CWIS sustenance and clearance, it's not the ULB, many other departments and linking with them, it is going to helpful a lot. Next slide, and that's the last slide, I think. These are the challenges. Again, that may be common to many of you. One is time, resource, and capacity constraint, and we kept on telling that, but we also learned it in the term of capacity constraint. Many times we found there is a lack of ownership and alignment also. Significant overlap I mentioned already, so it's not in currently inclusion is not a mandate. So creating that mandate is first thing which we have to do again and again. Having some structural issues are there. That comes across when we go for the implementation of the ground, like gender bias, caste-based discrimination. That is also going to impact this entire implementation. And last but not least, even in CWIS, we learned it again and again, where the city level is very pro, many things moved very faster, but when endorsement and subsequent changes, the lengthy institutional cycle, it gets diluted, it gets very much delayed. So these are the some challenges we also faced while implementing. So yeah, on this note, I'm ending this presentation here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Niladri. I think Mr. Niladri has systematically taken us through against each of the core principles of citywide inclusive sanitation, how Trichy is trying to take it forward. As he said very clearly, Trichy is a very interesting case of a very rapidly growing, very powerful economy in Tamil Nadu. In fact, Trichy is one of the most, one of those economic hub of Tamil Nadu. But despite that, despite having sewer system, partial sewer system, despite having STP, they believe that a combination of sewer and non-sewer options and integrating very strategically for achieving public health and also making sure equity is maintained, I think is a powerful lesson. It's not about the size of the city, whether they have a sewer system or a non-sewer system, but how they are integrating it systematically for improving performance on sanitation and equity, I think is something, a very interesting message coming from Niladri. There are a couple of questions, Mr. Niladri, in the chat box. If you could kindly attend to them, I'll be very, very grateful. Now, just one question from us. This whole issue of sewer system, you're working with all these engineers. Trichy already has a sewer system. They also have a STP. Now, how do you make sure you're dealing with the gray water? Because in those non-sewer areas, gray water is still a major concern, because while we capture the night soil in the containment system, right, septic tanks, the gray water must be growing in the stormwater drains and overflow. What is your current thinking on that?
Sir, thanks for raising this question. Actually, I mean, from TCC side also, we are getting very good energy in this regard. And the commissioner recently, he left, but already he started taking initiative on that and what the local solution can be done, particularly those areas. So on that regard, some technical options we have shared with them. He has shared all this thing at the state level, and they want to do some piloting on the ground. So, but they are very much serious on that.
There is a very clear roadmap in terms of how the grey water should be handled.
Yes.
And
yeah.
So that's good. Banerjee Saab, we will take the questions later, considering the time. We will take it in the form of a panel, but we will go to the next speaker. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Mr. Niladri.
Thank you.
Our next speaker for the day is also a participant in this cohort of ours, Dr. Abdullah Al-Mueed. Let me tell you, with with a doctoral degree. He's a civil engineer, and then with a doctoral degree from University of Tokyo. He's been in academics as well as now he is practicing as a development professional. He's working as a Chief Operating Officer of the CWIS and FSM support cell in Bangladesh. Today, you'll be speaking about city from Sakhipur municipality in Bangladesh. If I'm not wrong, Abdullah Saab, you'll be speaking about Tangai. You said it. Over to you, Abdullah Saab.
Thank you so much, Dr. Banerjee. So let me share my screen. I hope you can see my screen, right?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. First of all, I mean, I am like you to all the participants. I am here to learn from all of you, and I'm eager to learn more from your experience. And it's a splendid, opportunity for me. What is happening where? Before starting, the presentation today, I would like to, pay my all respect to one of my friends, to Mr. Prakash Amartya, who suddenly demised just last night, not less than 24 hours. And many of you know him. He is a very good, professional expert from Nepal, who has a lot of contribution for the CWIS, public toilet, FSM, rainwater harvesting and all. So I must pay the respect, and today's presentation I want to dedicate to him. Thank you, Dr. Banerjee and Professor Cherry. I mean, when you speak, it's you take it everything. So I'm grateful that I'm here to learn from you also. So this is here the Sakhipur experience. So from the first presentation, from the ADB's presentation, from the last presentation, Niladri, I mean, we learned a lot. But I would like to say one thing from Sakhipur Tangail experience, that what, where, and how to kick off. And that is a very key point I would like to say from my whole experience, how to kick off, the whole non-sewage sanitation or sewage sanitation. I mean, we want the sanitation, but how to kick off with the municipality through the CWIS lens. And of course, it's the non-sewage sanitation that we have here in the Sakhipur, as Bangladesh do not have sufficient sewage connection, except some Dhaka city, which is again not sufficient also. So welcome to my presentation, and already Dr. Banerjee gave a very brief introduction for me, and I am working in the CWIS FSM support cell, and I'm working in the side of the Belinda Gates Foundation. So if I consider the, Sakhipur experience, very ground level experience, I have taken today few grassroots level, points which are related with the whole CWIS lens, the responsibility, accountability, as well as some resourcing. So these are the things actually we started in 2004, even when FSM is not so much prominent, and CWIS, I don't think so. At that time it was there. So, but I converted all these things in the lens of CWIS, because now the CWIS has been evolving, and now this approach, we need to take it forward to reach our SDG 6.2 goal. So when we started during the end of 2014, so how did we kick off? What did we consider to have the whole sanitation value chain with the participation of the municipality authorities? Pardon me. With the participation of municipal authorities, that is very important, and that is the what CWIS has referred as some sort of planning exercise we need to do. For the Sakhipur municipality, from the very beginning, we considered the circular economical aspect, and that's why it is a little bit of the whole sort of the circular sort of thing, the whole sanitation value chain. I would refer one thing at the beginning, that when we started work with this municipality, we wanted to eliminate all sort of waste problem of the municipality. So at the beginning, while discussing with the municipal authority, very interesting story. We identified there are 3 types of waste. One is the solid waste, which is an acute problem. Of course, fecal sludge, which is again a growing concern, and definitely the sanitation expert, like when we work, that comes at first. And the third one, which is not common, like the poultry waste. Shakipur municipality has many poultry feed, farms, and they have the poultry waste also. So this is an interesting story. Poultry has 2 types of excreta, you can say, or waste. So one is very liquid sort of thing, another one is very dry sort of thing. So we, at the beginning, we committed to eliminate all sort of waste. We will treat everything. But when we started beginning the work, it eventually, returned to us that liquid waste that we cannot be able to collect the waste, and the dry waste, which has been collected by some local informal authority. I would, essence from the last presentation, there are many informal sector actors, the outskirts actors, which actually contributes for the waste minimization and management problem. So in Shakipur also, some, fish feeding small industries are there, and which actually collect those, poultry waste and dry waste and make those feed, fish feed there locally. So one waste is eliminated. We don't need to solve that problem. So there remains 2 problems. One is solid waste and fecal sludge. And when we begin at this journey, so it comes at the city sanitation planning. So the very beginning of it is the story of the 2014. And this is the diagram while we had the discussion with the city authority, mayor. So substantial discussion regarding cities information, and how to get those information, validation of those informations, and most importantly, what the city authority wants. And during that tenure, actually, there was we had the Local Government Act 2009, which actually gives the responsibility to solve, of the responsibility these Poroshobhas or city authorities, municipal authorities, to solve the problem of waste. At that time, there was no fecal waste. In the Local Government Act, it was referred as refuse, which we also use for these fecal sludge. Later on, institutional regulatory framework, which was developed in 2017, it was clearly demarcated the roles and responsibilities, and according to the present act and the institutional and regulatory framework, both the responsibilities of this fecal sludge and solid waste go to the municipal authorities. So it actually gives us a good yield at that time also. So, so the city informations are very important. From that, we actually can get the actual demand of the city authorities, as I mentioned, and we eliminated the one type of waste. How we did that? This is some sort of planning exercise we did, and finally we sorted out that we need to solve this fecal sludge and solid waste together. Land is an acute problem in Bangladesh. So at the very beginning, we wanted to solve the problem in one piece of land. So we decided some sort of technology, which I can show later. After discussing with the city authority and from many sector actors, and what will bring the success, what would be the contextual technology of this Shakipur Poroshobha. So there will be science, technology, innovation, what are available, everything. We discussed everything. But the catalyzing effect is what actually the market is there. What we like to do at the beginning, because we want to capture the whole sanitation value chain, and what market will govern actually the technology at the backside, that will give the appropriate technology of that Shakipur municipality. So market mapping was very important, and from where we actually identified there is Shakipur is a small municipality where about 40,000 population is there, but most of them are farmers, and the poultry, there are number of poultry feeders are there. So the farmers have a market of the local, compost. So we could easily link up with that one. And from the institutional aspect, there is a Department of Agricultural Extension of that municipality, which can be connected for the marketing and promoting of the organic soil if we can produce. that gives the leverage, that gives the responsibility, accountability of that municipality to go to select the technology which will go produce the compost product, not for the aquaculture project market, or not for the some renewable energy market like biogas. Of course, those can be utilized in other Poroshobhas as well. So for the Shakipur Poroshobha, we actually finally selected the co-composting sort of thing. How will it be operated by the Shakipur Poroshobha? There are so many good examples are now there, but there are very simplistic way. There are two approaches. One is the municipality-led approach, where municipality will do all sort of things by themselves and take the responsibility and show their accountability to provide the service to all the city dwellers, including the poor. So the other one is mostly the private sector led approach, which is also very much common in many cities in this country, where private sector has been given entity to provide the service, while municipal authority will be mostly acting as the supervising role. So, but during that time, at that time, it was very difficult to get some communities or some cohort of the sanitation workers at that municipality. So who actually can be the catalyst of this private sector approach. So in 2014, basically, the municipality decided to work or start with the municipality-led approach. That means according to their, local government act, they will provide the service, ensure the service, and regarding fee, of course, there are some policies also there. Maybe there will be some question. I will revert back to the in the discussion session. So finally, it was completely municipality-led approach, but eventually after 7 years of operation, it is now a blended mode. Sort of private sector is also participating in collaboration of this whole sanitation service in this Poroshobha. What are the tools actually facilitate guide for these Poroshobhas? Definitely some CSDA tool we use for the planning at the very beginning side, and from the very beginning I could still remember the SFD at the time we produced. It shows the 0%. You can see the left one diagram. This is the situation in 2014, but from the very beginning, this Sector Authority periodically developed the sheet flow diagram or excavator flow diagram to showcase the accountability that this city is now providing the safely managed sanitation situation. What is the situation at present, and how can we reach the target of 100% by the end of 2030? By the way, at 2014, at that time, we had a plan to reach about more than 80% to 90% by 2022-23. So it was the target in 2014. And periodical sheet flow diagram, when you see that, at the end of 2018, it gets to 43% safely managed sanitation, and recently, end of 2020, that means 2021, last year it was 58% of safely managed sanitation. So it's a gradual improvement, what I can see reflect here. So now I want to link actually with this sheet flow diagram, how are we actually taking this example for the other cities also. I would like to take this opportunity as well, because this is the good platform to showcase this one. So from the CWIS FSM support cell, actually we are unfolding this sort of, evidences to all of us. And as a part of that, we are also providing this, developing this knowledge brief, CWIS brief for Bangladesh, where you can see the rates are prominent for different parts of the city, and all this sheet flow diagram, you can find it in the Suzana's website. They are verified and peer reviewed and everything. So I can at least say that they are, have good, authenticity as well about the data. And we have developed more than 50 SFDs, which are found in the Suzana's website. I can refer that. And if I go back there, what is the actual technologies, if I can refer it here. But before that, I would like to show one more thing, like here, that we are using it now for the National Sanitation Dashboard of this Department of Public Health Engineering. I would like to request all of you to, whenever you have some time, please visit the sandboard.gov.bd. My presentation also entails the link of this web page, where you can see all the city profiles. We have just got 64 cities here. We have the target to reach 329 municipalities by the end of next 2 years. So if you just go one city, I just want to show you one thing so that you can play around later. So this is the data where you can see, like Jashar Poroshobha in 2020 data, we have the plan to monitor it and update the data frequently. And in this city profile, there is a scope of the IMIS integration, which we are now integrating, and hopefully within 1 year, you will see different sort of platform here in the sanitation dashboard. You can see the all the sheet flow diagram. It is also live. It will be live one when you will we will develop the next round of sheet flow diagram. So Shanky diagram, and you can play around here, the containment scenario and everything, city situation. So this type of thing, I believe that is a good example of practice by which we, solid waste management and fecal sludge management can be demonstrated, including the CWIS indicators and so on. So please requesting to play around this one, but I would like to have the last discussion here with a very 2 to 3 minutes. I'm taking more to have a virtual visit at the Shakipur co-compost plant. It is exactly like that. Some of you may visit, if I'm not wrong. So when the fecal sludge has been collected from the vacuum truck, so it undergoes inside the plant, and there are unplanted drying beds actually. So we dispose the fecal sludge on the unplanted drying beds. Mostly, it has the solid and liquid separation. So the solid deposits at the top, and the liquids undergone to further treatment to ABR and constructed wetland also. So here all the biodecomposition and degradation occurs, and in parallel, the solid waste collects from the city authority, which also needs to separate the organic part and inorganic part still, because 30% source separation can be achievable. So the point is, once we get this source separation at the plant, so that and the leachate treatment occurs, so the solid waste needs to be separated. But before that, the liquid part needs to be treated from the fecal sludge and undergoes to the
Banerjee sir, I think we lost him.
I guess we lost him. Yeah. Yes.
Polishing pond before it passes sawdust and a dry sludge that comes from. Now is it okay? Hello.
Yeah, but I think there's some disturbance because of the video, I think.
It's going much heavy on the net.
Okay, sure. No worries. So I can share the video link to all of you, but what I can say that all these details are, have been convened throughout all sort of participation from the municipalities, and that lies the whole CWIS concept that we are now unfolding. Thank you so much, Dr. Banerjee and Professor Chari. I am a fan of yours. Thank you so much. Over.
Thank you so much. I think this is a very fascinating presentation from Bangladesh. Primarily, it was focusing on Shakipur, but I think two interesting ideas for us. Number one, the system is designed, the citywide inclusive sanitation program is designed around the principles of circularity, where the waste should be used in a very productive way. And I think that's a very, very strong message that that its waste is not a waste, but it will go back into the nature, and then they are also hopefully monetizing some of these aspects. The second thing I think is the dashboard, the principles of Shakipur. I think they have taken it to the state level, monitoring it very systematically. I think it's a one of its kind initiative in the region. And I'm very, very grateful and thankful to Mr. Abdullah for sharing that, how the dashboard is actually enabling different municipalities to compete in a positive way and then demonstrate progress. I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from Shakipur and the experience of Bangladesh. Thank you very much. Now, there are some questions, but now we had 4 interesting presentations. What we will do is we have about 7 to 8 minutes before we close the session. I would now, the floor is open for any quick questions. I have a couple of more questions later, but I think it's important to give opportunity for other participants on this to ask questions. You can raise your hand and then go ahead and ask your question. Yeah, Mr. Gupta, over to you. Sorry, we kept you waiting.
No problem. It's been an interesting session. Thank you very much for the presentations. I'm interested to learn more from Kampala and also from a colleague from ADB and other presentation as well. My question would be, we talk a lot about benchmark. I think 2 or 3 presentations talk about benchmarking. And in your context, perhaps asking Dr. Najib and also Ms. Graziel from ADB, how did you benchmark the governance part, sanitation governance part, before you introduced the CWIS? Can you elaborate more on that? Thank you very much, Professor Chari.
So, Dr. Najib, would you like to go, brother? If you're there.
He's not around, so
He's not there,
so, Ms. Graziel, would you like to go? The question is about, generally we benchmark service standards, but there are a lot of institutional issues associated with citywide inclusive sanitation. How do we benchmark?
For ADB, we benchmark in terms of our experiences in the past projects on conventional sanitation and what are the roadblocks that we have encountered in the past projects that we could apply the lessons learned and the best practices in our succeeding projects. And of course, in terms of the governance in terms of the national governments, of course, we have to consider in our CWIS planning and design the political buy-in, of course, of how we would market CWIS in our potential clients and partners.
Dr. Najib, are you there? Josna, is he there?
Yes, I'm back. Sorry.
Yeah, Dr. Najib, the question was about benchmarking the non-quantifiable institutional components of citywide inclusive sanitation, be it accountability, be it responsibility, performance monitoring systems. There are so many aspects that would make citywide inclusive sanitation a success. So how do we benchmark? Are there any tools? Are there any experiences?
Yes, thank you. There are quite a number of experiences. So I will give you a practical one. So for what we did for Kampala, we structured a partnership with Etequini, and the initial exchange is about what are those fundamental priorities that need urgent attention, because you need to also show some quick wins for the people engaged, so that you are able to catalyze, incentivize, motivate performance. So normally the first step first step, and I really encourage this, is a simple diagnostic. So, and I have seen during the presentations, there are a number of tools. On the enabling environment, for example, the city service delivery assessment tool is a very good one to understand responsibilities, financing, and stuff like that. The sheet flow diagram is also a good one. So there are these simple tools that help you diagnose where you are. And this provides a basis for you to engage in a benchmarking exercise with a very clear objective. What are your priorities? What do you want to improve? And where can you get the best, some of the best practices that you can share? So for us, for example, we focused on building evidence at city level for decision making with the Tekwini. So that is one. So secondly was, how do we address non-sewer sanitation, which was the biggest problem? So looking at a mix of approaches. And the third one was the governance aspect. So you must, first of all, have a benchmark baseline assessment using basic tools. Secondly, define benchmarking objectives. Thirdly, try to identify partners that can support you to move. And then, of course, the benchmarking partner should also be able to support you in guidance, in improvement, in learning, in exchanging, to support you in the incremental improvement. So there are also many other examples, I mean, from the WOPs, water operator partnerships, that you can draw and translate them to the sanitation services.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Najib. Mr. Gupta, there are other tools that we are using. Of course, we heard from Dr. Abdullah also how they are benchmarking, different cities, bringing onto a common dashboard and track the performance. But your particular question was about how do we benchmark the institutional parameters. So we start with political commitment, for example. How do I measure political commitment? How do I measure? So we have a method where council resolution, or in our case, Paurushava taking a resolution to adapt the bylaws of citywide inclusive sanitation could be a good starting point. So that demonstrate that the council discussed and willing to take certain reforms. So that could be one. Setting up a department for non-sewer sanitation is another important mechanism to demonstrate the commitment of the cities to take this approach forward. So that's the second level. Third is taking a resolution of scheduled desludging. A council resolution to introduce scheduled desludging is another important thing. Tariff reforms is another. So there are ways in which we can quantify or we can map the so-called institutional reforms leading to citywide inclusive sanitation programming. We would be very happy to share with some of our experiences. But I think as we progress, we could also discuss with Dr. Abdullah, we could discuss with Mr. Niladri and others, how this benchmarking is being taken up in Tamil Nadu, in Africa, as well as in Bangladesh. And we would be very happy to share with you our experience in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. Now there's another hand, Mr. Singh, Nagendra Singh, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Actually, you have already partly answered my question. My question was something related to, because the city is quite heterogeneous and there are different segment of people and their requirement is also different. So how you match with the service level and the tariff, because there are different type of group, there are different requirements, there are different expectations. Some are requesting very high level of service, some are requesting even dislodging at a certain interval is fine. So how we really adjust those heterogeneous society with the different tariff collection and considering all those people together so that they are all satisfied and paying the services for which we are charging.
I would direct this question to Mr. Niladri, because Tiruchi has both sewer system, I'm assuming that they have water tariff and wastewater tariff. And then they also have non-sewer system where they have to have desludge and private, they have to pay to the private sector. So how this tariff balancing is done? Is there any role of the municipal corporation to make sure that tariff is equitably handled well, where the services that the poor are properly subsidized in a targeted way? And we could also ask Ms. Grazil how this tariff is, how this differential population have different requirements and willingness to pay, ability to pay. How do you handle it?
Let me share the Trichy experience. It's
Yes.
a very interesting question and very relevant question. So Trichy, yes, water tariff and sewer tariffs are there, but it's very flat slab type. It's not key with the user and etc. Only household and industry or commercial establishment. That is the two category. There is no any specific slab for the urban poor in both way. No, when it is coming urban poor, if they are now we are also discovering in the urban poor where the sewer connections are there. There's a lots of other issues coming in terms of getting connection, not getting connection. So that's another challenge is there because the negotiation is on the kind of amount any household need to pay upfront to get the connection. For many houses, urban poor came forward and said it's pretty heavy at one point if some installment system can be introduced. So that corporation is now considering. There is no official decision has been taken. So that is in terms of getting connection. In terms of on-site sanitation, predominantly the city is relying on the private sector. Private sector charges are moderate. I would not say very high because so many trucks, they compete with themselves, but still their tariffs are higher than what ULB charges. ULB charges per load of 5 KLD around 750 rupees, whereas private sector charges something in between 1,200 to 1,500 rupees. The problem with the urban poor is because of the non-standard containment or because of their location in the slum congested, many times the big trucks can't go inside. One, they need frequent dislodging because of the non-standard containment. So that way also they have to spend more. Secondly, since truck can get inside, they use more longer hose pipes. That has also cost implication. So overall, they actually pay more than the high income and mid income.
Correct.
To the private sector. So that area is again I would not say still it has been it's equitable service. The approach to ULB is that to increase the number of fleet so that because currently the trucks ULB is only deploying for the CTPT emptying, not for the household level.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's the current scenario.
So this is a work in progress.
Yeah, a work in progress.
It's a work in progress. So Ms. Grazil, I just want to twist the question of Mr. Nagendra Singh. Generally the sewerage tariff is completely underpriced. In many cases, it is almost free. It's part of the water bill. The water bill is nowadays the trend is water is also free up to certain consumption level. Even in Delhi, it's almost free up to 20 kiloliters. And then on top of it, wastewater is just about 50% of the water bill, and it means practically nothing is charged for the rich. And whereas when it comes to the poor, they have to engage a private operator to desludge, and they end up paying 1,000 or 1,500 rupees per trip, even if it is once in 3 years or once in 5 years. So isn't it completely inequitable? How do we fix this problem if we are talking sanitation as a public service? What is your advice to us, and what is ADB trying to do?
In terms of the financing and the tariff implications of CWIS projects, for ADB, we have a few, in terms of with respect to the capital cost, for financing the capital cost for the poor, we have presented in one of our case studies actually the possible options of augmenting the financing part for the CWIS projects for the poor households. We could have first, flexible payments where utilities amortizes the connection cost into sewage charges over a longer payment period. Or we could have discounts for the poor, loans, subsidies, and grants. But aside from lowering or removing the burden of the capital cost to the poor, of course, on the other hand, we also have the recurrent cost for the sewerage services. For this, I think the utilities might consider differential pricing in their tariff. Example is social block tariff, wherein the high volume wastewater producers pay more sewerage services than those who produce less wastewater. This is on the premise that we
But
assume.
how about the non-sewer services? What is your advice on the non-sewer? Because yes, we can do a cross subsidy for the water supply related services or sewer services. But when it comes to non-sewer services, what is your advice, ma'am?
For the non-sewer services, I think that maybe similar to the financing of the capital cost, we could also offer flexible payments, installment, setting as
On the desludging side,
on the deslodging side, of course, the deslodging cost, we could also offer, because I think that in some areas, what's the setup is that pay as you get the service, right? Maybe if the cost is anchored on also on the water bills, we could also have the dislodging fees on an installment basis. Setting aside also in my previous work here in the Philippines, I also had experience in providing septage management services to rural communities, and what we have experienced is that they have less willingness to avail dislodging services, dislodging of their septic tanks, if we offer that we will dislodge you, but you have to pay around 4,000 pesos one time. But when it's incorporated in their water bill, installment for say 60 months, they have more willingness to avail the service because it's spread over a longer period of time. Thus, it's not affecting their cash flow.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Singh, just to respond to your question also, we have experience of Hyderabad. Before I ask Mr. Rajiv Kumar as the last question, where we have this cross-subsidization even for non-sewer sanitation. Josna will speak about it. For the low-income communities, the desludging cost is 500 rupees, whereas for the commercial and other establishments, it is actually increased than the market rate. So it is like 3,500 rupees. So there is a cross subsidization by the private desludger, from which they get a market demand from commercial areas. They use it to cross subsidize the low income area desludging operation. So Hyderabad Water Board, Hyderabad Water and Sewerage Board has introduced this concept of differential tariff even for non-sewer sanitation related operation, not only for the sewer related operations. So we can share this information with you. Josna would request you to share with all the participants that it is possible to structure differential tariff even in non-sewer sanitation areas so that equitable systems can be provided. Now, the last question is for Mr. Rajiv Kumar. I have already exceeded the time. Mr. Rajiv Kumar, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Chari. This is an extension to what is being discussed now. This is about when we say that for water for sure and also for the non-sewer sanitation facilities, if poor are paying more, and by extension we take that they have willingness to pay. But when we try to put it at a macro scale, or maybe inviting private sector to service them, the willingness on the private sector part, which otherwise have been responding to the needs, because all these are being catered by the private sector, maybe not organized one. But why do not organized private sector is ready if one, that the poor are paying more, and two, by extension, that if they have the willingness to pay over? Thank you. Any experience around
that? If you could, what you're saying is, how do we organize the private sector to make sure that the poor get equitable sanitation? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, with the assumption that currently they are paying more, and so they have a certain willingness to pay. Because if they are paying, that means that willingness may be modulated through whatever compulsion, but they pay.
Okay, so Dr. Najib, would you like to take this question?
Sorry, I was muted. Sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a very smart question. I mean, very and you heard from my sister from ADB also hinted on some of the instruments they are already using. For us in Kampala, I prefer to use practical examples. One smart way is to capitalize on the economies of scale in the low-income areas and try to lower the costs of getting the service. For me, this is easier sometimes. So, for example, what we are doing is you aggregate demand. For example, you schedule, especially the scheduling of emptying, you try to accumulate a number of clients that need emptying services, and you are able to mobilize private sector. So the scheduling and the structuring of the service delivery is done by the municipality. And of course, you have all these other background arrangements, contracts, and service level agreements and stuff like this. So eventually, you are able to schedule services based on aggregated demand in certain areas. So if instead of serving one household in area X, you have, for example, 100, and in that case, you have lower pricing mechanism. Two, you could also do the same for toilet construction. For example, you have aggregated demand in targeted areas. The private sector will be willing to provide subsidized or relatively lower costs compared to the market price if you intentionally structured a program that is constructing a huge number of toilets in a certain area targeted. And these interventions don't need to be already subsidized. You are just playing around with the economies of scale. And I'm talking about realities here where, for example, the municipality has no funding from a multilateral bank, but you are trying to think around existing resources on how you can lower costs. Of course, these can be supplemented by the conventional ways, tariffs, surcharges on water and stuff like that. So for us, that's how we're doing it. And then other targeted programs funded by multilateral banks can come, of course, with subsidies and stuff like that. But going forward, to sustain this kind of financing mechanisms for the poor, the municipality or the city or the utility has to be a little smarter, doing things beyond business as usual, and intervening into the market in a more structured way. This is how I could respond to this. Thank you.
Dr. Banerjee, over to you. I think we have exceeded the time, but over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, it was, I hope everybody would agree with me here. It was a fantastic session we had today of learning different kinds of experiences and interventions. Just before concluding, few things. As I said in the beginning, begin with the using of the LMS system and start reading through the materials that has been shared. And of course, today's presentations, I know there are a lot of questions. Please use your Slido to raise your questions, concerns, and these presentations from today would be uploaded in your in the LMS system, so you can go through and come with the queries, questions of yours. And of course, the recording of today, in a day or two, we will upload it in YouTube and the link will be shared in the WhatsApp group.
Actually,
And
Ms.
then-
Brazil also shared some very interesting 3 or 4 documents. We will also put that in the LMS system.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much
Absolutely.
for sharing,
That's
ma'am, the
true.
material. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And of course, next Wednesday, we meet with Professor Hashimoto-san, and we will have a different session on Wednesday. In between, please keep yourselves engaged with the LMS. In the WhatsApp group, I would like to start with some kind of a discussion. Let's keep the discussions alive. And of course, see you next Wednesday again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.